Hello and welcome. Welcome to the Midweek Reboot. I'm glad that you could join me for this session. Please put a thumbs up if you can hear me. I think everybody can hear me. If you can just confirm in the chat so that I make sure I'm not talking to myself again like 2 weeks ago. Ah, wonderful. So it's already Wednesday. It's the last week of January. Can you believe? Drop it in the chats. What's one word to describe how you feeling this week? How are you feeling this week? One word that describes how you're feeling. I know I've been busy, but I'm also trying to take it in my stride. There's work and there's also life. Okay, there's tired. Yes. And that's a really good word, tired, because what I've been seeing is that it's late January, the energy starts leaking, and there's increased expectations. There's so many requests that's coming our way. And already people are feeling stretched. So the word tired actually encapsulates what many people are feeling at this point in time. And it's only January, team. It's only January. Sorry, I'm saying team, but I'm thinking I'm back at work. It's only January, and we're feeling the way we're feeling. So it means that we need to just also reflect. And therefore, this midweek reboot is so important for us to just stop and just reflect on what's happening. Hi, Abib. That's so great that you could join as well. Um, so today we're going to talk about boundary management, and it's not about rejecting work or people. Let me share my screen. So, and I think everybody can see my screen. A thumbs up if you can see my screen. We're going to talk about boundary management. And it's not rejecting work or rejecting people. It's not about being more assertive. It's about conserving energy so that your delivery and ambition it's sustainable into Feb and beyond. So somebody in the comments said tired, and that's so true. If we're feeling tired now in January, imagine the rest of the year. So, the reason I chose boundary management, there's a little story behind this. I was engaging with one of my colleagues yesterday, and he was identified in a survey that I did as always a person that goes the extra mile. And he's been delivering above and beyond what is expected. When I spoke to him, he says he's working nonstop. He has no time for the family. When his kids come to him, he tells them he's busy with his work. So I thought that is actually a good example of where work impacts your boundaries, your family boundaries as well. And he takes his work home. Then we spoke further. He spoke about how his health is bad. He's not able to go to the gym. Last year, he had some kind of injury whilst he played paddle, and he wasn't able to recover from that. He says his emotional state is not good. So, on one hand, he's being recognized for outstanding work. There were 4 or 5 comments from various stakeholders in that team that spoke about how amazing he is. But when you speak to him, it's a different situation. And one can understand that he's not really managing his boundaries. So I thought today let's talk about boundary management because this might be a key differentiator in terms of setting yourself up for February and beyond. And I want to emphasize boundaries are not just about saying no to people. It's really about where do you use your energy? Where is it allowed to go? You must have a choice in where your energy goes. You need to be deliberate and purposeful on how you expend energy. So, if you're exhausted, it's probably not because you're bad at managing time. It's not that you're lazy or you procrastinate or you can't manage your time. It really is about you absorbing so much. You're taking on additional tasks. There's additional expectations, an emotional load that doesn't really belong to you. It was not meant to be yours. Does that resonate with you? Put it in the chats below. I'm interested to know. Does this resonate with you? Do you absorb other people's tasks, their expectations, their urgent items? Is that something that you absorb as your own? Because that might be also why you're exhausted, because it's not what's yours, it's the additional things that comes on your plate. Got a responsive here. Definitely, people, bad planning, and inefficiency become my problem and overloads me. And that's so true. Let's pause over here to look at this comment. Definitely, people and bad planning and inefficiency become my problem and overloads me. So, other people's bad planning or lack of planning, their inefficiencies, then land up on your plate. And why? Why do you think it lands up on your plate? Because you are the person that can deliver. You are the reliable one. That's the reason why people will bring it to you to do it because they know you'll be able to do it last minute. You'll be able to ensure that you see it through. You've built your reputation around delivery. Saying yes protects your image. Saying no creates discomfort. So most people think they struggle with boundaries because there's a lack of confidence or they don't know how to say no. I'd like you to pause over here and think, do you have a problem saying no? Do you know how to say no? Yes, we do know how to say no. But when put in that situation, we won't say no because it's uncomfortable. It doesn't mean that you don't say no because you lack confidence. Saying yes protects your reputation. You're known as the reliable one. If I call on person X, they will always deliver. They will move mountains to make it happen. They're helpful and they're also competent. They won't say they won't say no because they will want to be helpful to you. There's a comment here. I don't have a problem saying no, but my work is a representation of me. And if I don't deliver, it's a reflection of me. And that's so true because that's protecting your image. Your work is a representation of you, speaks to image. And if you don't deliver, then it also reflects on you. So you want to ensure that you protect your reputation by all means possible. So therefore, you don't say no and you'll continue to take on and absorb other people's urgent uh, urgent items. Saying no introduces emotional discomfort and also the fear of disappointing. So you might feel uncomfortable to say no, and you might also fear disappointing somebody. Then there's also, if you're like myself, I'm an independent contractor. If you say no, then that will also impact your contract as well. So, what would you say yes to and what would you say no to? Because the no might have implications down the line on your contract. So, therefore, some people are careful on just saying no to a piece of work. Saying yes also gives you that immediate relief, even if it costs you later. I'll say yes, but I'll just see how I manage it. And that's the kind of narrative you tell yourself. And then you get used to operating in that way that it becomes the way you operate. And it doesn't serve you because down the line, you'll be tired. You'll also be resentful. So saying yes might relieve the pressure at that moment, but it definitely costs you from a perspective of your energy and depletion of energy, which then leads to, by December, burnout. And we've seen burnout actually happen much earlier in the year last year. So we need to look at what we say yes to, what we say no to. You struggle with saying no because you've been rewarded for not having any boundaries. So people know you're the go to person. You will get things done. If I count, if I call on person X, she will do it no matter what. So I'd like to ask you a question. What are you protecting when you say yes? Are you protecting your workload or are you protecting your reputation? And one of the responses spoke to protecting your reputation because that's a representation of yourself. Energy doesn't disappear, it leaks. And what happens when there's energy leakage? You stay mentally on after work. That means you're thinking about whatever it is at work, you can't switch off. I was in a session recently with, well, when I say recently, it was late last year. And one of the leaders mentioned that they can't switch off even when they're sleeping, they can't switch off. Their mind is constantly on work. And that's what we mean by you're mentally on after work. Even though you're at home, that's your downtime, but you're constantly thinking about work. You carry responsibility that isn't formally yours. And that's where you leak energy. It's somebody else's deadline that fell onto your plate. And then now you become responsible for it. And it's formally not your responsibility. You respond quickly to everything to avoid tension. Okay, you're quick to respond. And also, for example, you're emailed, you're copied on an email. If that email is not directly to you, then should you give it so much time that you actually take away from your workday? You're actually leaking energy by dealing with something that's not yours. I found myself in a situation where I would respond to emails where I'm copied on. It's not my area, but I feel I need to provide input on that. So I'm calling it upon myself by responding to that email that I was copied on, as opposed to if they really wanted my input, then I would have been emailed directly as opposed to being copied on it. It's a slight difference, but what do you put your energy to? Because if you put your energy on everything, you're definitely going to leak energy. Then also, you leak energy by anticipating needs before they're asked. So that's also being anxious about your work. If you're going to anticipate those needs, wo- yes, there's certain things we need to think ahead, work ahead, but we don't need to be anxious and anticipate everything. And then you're actually leaking energy because you're putting energy in the wrong place. This is where energy gets leaked. Your ambition keeps saying, I'll just handle it, until handling it becomes your full-time job. You can't just keep handling it. Ambition doesn't burn energy by itself. It's unprotected ambition. You can't want to be all over at the same time. You need to determine where you're going to put your time and energy. I have a question for you. Where do you feel most drained? After tasks or after interactions with people? If you can put it down in the chat. Where do you feel most drained? After tasks or interactions? I get the feeling that some of you might say both. Because, yes, tasks drain your energy as well as people drain your energy, those interactions, those meetings. So, also, you need to see where there's energy leakage. Do you have to be at all meetings? Can you say no to certain meetings? There's a comment here after interactions. When I'm called up and asked to do things that I didn't plan for, tasks that are not bad for me. Okay. So, yes, that's uh, especially where tasks are not meant for you, it was not allocated to you. And here again, you remember in my first live, I spoke about alignment with teams, alignment with your seniors. You need to align so that it doesn't become your issue. Their lack of planning, their inefficiencies does not become your issue. Burnout often comes from constant exposure and not necessarily from your volume of work. Constant exposure to that kind of to operating in that environment where there's lack of planning, where there's inefficiencies. Your boundaries collapse under pressure, and it's not random. Most boundaries break because of of patterns. There's patterns. So there's breakdowns in those boundaries, and you can identify it through patterns. And some of the common triggers are it's urgent, even if it's real or if it's implied, but there's urgency around a certain activity. Now that breaks down boundaries because you're called up to do something that became urgent because somebody else indicated it's urgent. Then there's authority. A lot of the times, your senior or somebody higher up in the hierarchy will call upon you to do something. It's very difficult to say no in that situation. I know once I was in a presentation and it was a large grouping of people. I developed the presentation, the leader was going through it, and I was driving that presentation from my computer. Then I was asked, whilst I was driving the presentation from my computer, I was asked to change the last slide. The leader didn't want to take no, didn't want to take no that I couldn't do it at that point in time. The leader expected me to make those changes. And then we needed to see how we got around it by taking a short break. And we had to put something in between so that I could go off the presentation, make the change, and that was ready for the leader to present on. That moment created lots of stress for me. One of my boundaries was impacted on. Even though I said no, the no was not heard. So sometimes authority dictates whether you say yes or no to the request. Another trigger is guilt. It'll only take a minute. I'm not sure about you. Sometimes somebody calls you up and asks for some help. I find myself still in that situation where if a person calls for help, I won't just say no. I will try and help them out. I'll feel guilty if I don't help them. Obviously, if I'm pushing certain deadlines as well, I'll say I'll help you a little later. But yes, saying no brings out some guilt, and that also breaks down the boundaries that one might have set for themselves. Are you one of those people that feels guilty if they're not able to help? And if you're not, then kudos to you that you're not feeling guilty, because you can always, your work comes first and then you can help other people. Then there's fear of disappointing. And I think we spoke about that as well, that people feel they don't want to disappoint the person who has asked them for help. And I've got a response over here, you don't feel guilty by saying no to people who want help. And yes, it's not being selfish. You protecting your energy. There's certain times you'll help, and there's certain times a person can do it themselves. And now you don't have the excuse of saying you don't know. You can go onto an AI platform and ask, how do I do dot dot dot? And you'll get a response as to how to do it. There's a lot of the times when I'm learning a platform or a new program, I'll go onto YouTube, I'll learn how to do it. And then once I learn it, then people want me to teach it to them, as opposed to them going onto YouTube or reading up or asking ChatGPT a response on how do you do that, and it gives you step by step how to do something. But people don't go that extra mile to find out for themselves. They rather be shown. So, yes, you shouldn't feel guilty. But another common trigger is being seen as difficult. Oh, she always says no. She's the no girl. She keeps saying no. So you're being tagged as the difficult one. But why did it land on your table in the first place? Is it your responsibility? So here's an important point. Every time you feel resentment, you feel tension, or you feel dread, you need to pause. That emotion is pointing to a boundary that was crossed or ignored. So I'll repeat that again. Every time you feel resentment, there's tension, there's dread, you need to pause because a boundary was crossed. And you should not ignore that. That emotion you're feeling is pointing to some kind of boundary that was crossed or ignored. I have a question for you. What, which trigger gets you most? Is it the urgency? Is it guilt? Is it authority? It comes from seniors or higher up in the hierarchy? Or is it wanting to be needed? Which trigger gets you most and crosses a boundary? Urgency, guilt, authority, and being needed. You can put it down in the chats. Urgency. So I've got a response over here, urgency. And it might be urgency. It might be different things for different people. And if you're watching this after the live, other things might be triggers for you. But it's important, as I said, to pause and identify what are those triggers that impact on boundaries and the crossing of those boundaries. And here we said again, urgency is other people's lack of planning, other people's inefficiencies that will impact you. I'd like to put forward this three-part boundary check. The first part, the first block is capacity. And this here is energy that we're talking about. This is the question you need to ask yourself. Do I realistically have the energy for this without recovery debt? So, by this I mean, recovery debt is you can do the thing, but you will feel it later. You'll pay for it later through exhaustion, irritability, tiredness, brain fog, needing the weekend just to feel normal again, or starting the next week already tired. Now that's where there's a recovery debt. You're going to pay for it later. Yes, you can do it now. You had to help with a presentation, you had to help with a report, you had to help with putting financials together. But later on, in a few hours' time, or later in the day, or later in the week, you're going to pay for it. So, the three-part boundary check, the first one is capacity. And you ask yourself, do I realistically have the energy for this? Is it within your scope of work? Can I do this and still feel like myself afterwards? Now, that's important. Okay. The next one is responsibility. Is this actually mine to carry, or am I absorbing it? Responsibility speaks to ownership. Who owns that piece of work? Is there a way of pushing back? Just because you can do something doesn't mean you're the one that should do it, especially if it's not sitting with you. And a lot of that energy drain comes from carrying responsibility that was never formally yours. So here's an example. Somebody asks you to fix something urgently. You step in because you're helpful, you know how to do it, and you do it. Especially if that somebody is a senior. Then you're mentally carrying it. It becomes your responsibility. If there's any changes, it's upon you to make those changes. And also, you start internalizing it. The outcome is yours to carry, the following up is yours to carry. That's not your responsibility. It never was your responsibility. Can you see you absorbed it from somebody else? And when responsibility is not clear, it quietly spreads. And it really usually lands up on who's the most reliable person who can carry that. And therefore, with this team that I'm working with as well, they're given everything. All the responsibilities is given to them. If it's not allocated to somebody else, it's dumped on them. So, what we're trying to do now is to identify what are their core responsibilities. Because, yes, you are disrespecting that role, you're disrespecting that person if you throw everything at them. So, what's the responsibility for this grouping of people? Once we define what their responsibility is, we're going to engage with the relevant people, the various seniors, to indicate what those responsibilities are, what's in scope and what's out of scope. So be very clear on what your responsibility is. The third one is cost. What will get sacrificed? And ask yourself, what will this take away from? Focus, rest, or something important? And that's how you determine the impact from a cost perspective. What will be sacrificed? Because cost is about trade offs. If I do this, then I'm not able to do something else. And is that something else core to my work? If I'm helping out somebody and it's not, and I feel guilty about it, and I want to just help them out, that time that's being taken helping somebody else out will take away from my core work. It might mean that in the evening, I need to put in extra time to work through it. So you see, it's trade offs, and there's a sacrifice linked to cost. So you need to identify what is that sacrifice that you're making. The cost of a yes often shows up later in places you didn't expect. So, especially this one colleague that I spoke to you about earlier, the cost of him not saying no, him always doing things as requested, going over and above, even though what he's delivering is enough, he still goes over and above. The sacrifice that he's making is less time with his family. So, what sacrifice are you making? What's the cost? Does it impact on your your mental health, your state of being? Are you tired? Are you able to cope in the day? Boundaries aren't about whether you can do something. They're about whether you should be doing it. So you will be capable. You want to be responsible, but it's not whether you can do it. Should you be doing it? And I'd like you to ask yourself that question when next week or even tomorrow and Friday, as you work through things, if things land on your desk, it's urgent, it's a priority. You need to ask yourself, is this mine to carry? And somebody else I spoke to, I indicated that if you're going to take something on, then you need to agree upfront with your senior. Let's reprioritize. If you're giving me this new piece of work to do, let's deprioritize something else. So it's about that engagement as well. You can't just keep taking on work and then expecting to deliver everything. So engage, communicate, deprioritize something if something has landed on your desk and it's deemed to be urgent and a high priority. The question to you is, which of these do you usually skip? Is it the capacity, responsibility, or cost? Which part of it do you usually skip? And remember, boundaries become easier when they're decisions and not just emotional reactions. You can't just react to something. It becomes easier when it's a very deliberate decision. And I'd like you to remember this. Saying no isn't about doing less, it's about carrying the load and using the energy for the right things, things that you need to do. We need to ensure that we are we are containing our energy, we are managing our energy, we are using our energy in the right way. And the response over here is all three. There's times that we skip either the capacity, even if we don't have the energy, we'll still do it. And there's a recovery debt linked to it. Then there's responsibility, even though it's not mine, I will carry it. And you absorb other people's urgency, other people's priority. You even absorb other people's anxiety over a certain piece of work. So you need to be mindful. And then also, there's cost. You will do it despite your health, despite how you're feeling. And what I said about cost is it takes away from something, your focus, your rest, your peace, your state of being, or something important, like my one colleague who's taking time away from his family. Before he knows it, his kids would be all grown up. And where would time have gone? And that's something I raised with him as well, because we were having a conversation about boundaries. Boundaries don't need drama. It doesn't mean you it doesn't mean a hard no. So you don't need to say, and it's not about having attitude, but there's practical boundary options. You can say you'll delay it. Let me come back to you after I check my workload. You don't need to say yes on the spot. We remember I told you we want to feel relief, and it gives us automatic relief once we say yes. But you can pause and delay it and say, let me come to back to you after I check my workload. Just this very week, there were other requests for my assistance from a communications perspective, developing various communications. And this just landed on my desk. So the project's urgency became my urgency. The boundary that I put was I can assist, but this is the date I can deliver on. These are the source information I require in order to put it together, because I'm not going to run after various people to get that information. I need them as a project to provide it to me so I can develop a communication for them. And then I indicated I can deliver on so and so time. Then there was a request for another template as well that came in with this request for the communication. And I said, I will do it up. I'll provide you with a template. I'll develop the template for you, but you can change it based on your needs. So it doesn't keep coming to me if there's a change, and then that will be draining my energy. So I delayed it and I communicated effectively as to my turnaround time as well. I need a 1 to 2 days advance notice in order for me to deliver on a piece of work. So you can delay it. Then there's scope. I can help with X, but not Y. So you know what your role is, you know what your responsibility is, because it's very easy for somebody to say, can you do this? Yes, I can do that, but I'm not able to assist you with that. I can do X, but I can't do Y. And you can say it in a nice way, but then people know that they can't step on you as well. Okay? Conditions. I can do this if this deadline moves. It's the example I used earlier. I can prioritize this piece of work, but it means that the other piece of work that I needed to do, we need to deprioritize that and we need to agree on a new date. Or you can also redirect. This might be better for X person to do as it's within their role and their responsibility, or with this team because it doesn't belong to me. So a boundary is not a refusal, it's not just a no, it's also how you position it. Which one of, so a question to you is, which one would reduce your stress the most? Delay, scope, or conditions? And delay is, let me come back to you after I check my workload. Scope is, I can help with X, not Y. And conditions is, I can do this if the deadline moves. So, which one will reduce the stress the most for you? What's your thoughts on that? I'd love to hear. And again, you don't need to be confrontational. You need options. How can you approach it? So the response over here, that one of the responses is all three, actually, depending on the situation. So true. So you see the importance of pausing. Then you can use the options. And I want to just repeat the options so you can remember it. You can delay it. Let me come back to you after I check my workload. You can indicate I can help with X and not Y. I can do this if the deadline moves, and you negotiate a reprioritized deadline. I thought let's use an example of a very successful person, Warren Buffett. And here, the most successful people say no a lot. He's spoken many times about how aggressively he protects his time. Successful people know what belongs to them, and they zone in and they focus on that, on just that. And despite endless opportunities, meetings, and requests, he keeps his calendar deliberately light. Remember, I told you about 3 meetings maximum a day? And these are meetings that you provide input to. It's important for decision making. It's not something you just there to listen, or a team member is there to represent the team. Doesn't mean that the whole team needs to be there. So it's being very deliberate. The 3 meetings maximum per day will help you to keep your calendar light. He says no to most things, even good opportunities, because it's about the cost. If I take this, there's trade offs. I need to give something back, there's a sacrifice. He believes that focus is his biggest competitive advantage. He doubles down, laser focus. Okay, so sometimes we lose focus. We do a whole lot of things. We try to multitask, but they say multitasking is a myth because you're dividing your attention and you're not doing anything effectively. You rather, also, as I mentioned, the 45-minute block, focus on it for 45 minutes and get something done as opposed to being pulled all over the place. So here's a line from Warren Buffett, and I'll paraphrase it. The difference between successful people and very successful people is that very successful people say no to almost everything. So the difference between successful people and very successful people is that very successful people say no to almost everything. And they're not worried about how other people perceive them, because they know by doing these things, it's going to move the needle. So Warren Buffett is not less ambitious. He's one of the richest men in the world. He's just more selective. His boundary doesn't limit his ambition. It actually protects his ambition. And then most of us, we tend to do the opposite. We say yes to everything. We don't want to disappoint people. And then wonder why our energy disappears. So I thought that's a great case study for us to learn from, the example of Warren Buffett. If you have any questions, please put it down on the chat. Guilt doesn't mean you're wrong. Guilt often appears when you break a long standing pattern. It's uncomfortable, but you need to break it. But you feel guilty. But remember, it's about boundary management, it's about energy management. And people are used to your availability. I'll call you up and I'll and they'll know that you'll get it done. And you're changing the rules of the game midway. So the guilt will definitely creep in. But if you don't protect your boundaries now, then that's definitely going to lead to burnout. It's not maybe it will be burnout, it will be definitely you will be burnt out by mid-year. So feeling guilty doesn't mean you're setting the wrong boundary. It means that you're setting new ones. And yes, it will feel difficult at the beginning, but go with it. And again, I say, The positioning of how you say things is important, and you must teach people how to treat you. I'd like you to think about it. What boundary are you avoiding because of discomfort? What boundary are you avoiding because of discomfort? Sit with that even after this live and think about what boundary are you avoiding because you don't want discomfort. And remember, discomfort is part of boundary formation. It's not a sign of failure, but when you creating boundaries, it's it's new to you, it's hard for you. So yes, you will be in a state of discomfort as you setting those boundaries. Protecting your energy protects your future. So your ambition is not the problem, your willingness to carry too much is. Yes, you want to be seen in a certain way. Uh, you your reputation depends on it. You don't want to be seen as less. So yes, your ambition can still be there, but it's your willingness to carry too much, everything, that becomes the problem. And it's not sustainable. And it will definitely lead to you being drained. If you don't decide where your energy goes, then other people will decide it for you. Unintentionally, but consistently determine where your energy goes. It will be dictated by other people unless you get into the driving seat and decide where you want to spend your energy. So, for this week, don't just change everything. And this midweek reboot is to actually just look at where we can change things, adjust it just a little bit so that we can be more whole, more effective, and not leak energy. So just identify and notice, where does your energy drop the fastest? That's where your next boundary belongs. So where you're leaking energy, you need to take note of it. Then you need to put boundaries to protect yourself. Are there any questions? You can put it into the chat. We've got a few minutes left, and I'm coming to my last slide. I'm just going to the chats. Okay, you're most welcome. I've got here great talk. Thanks. And I hope that it's useful. Some of these points that I raised will make you more mindful of how you set your boundaries and when are people crossing those boundaries. I've got a closing quote by Brene Brown. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. I'll repeat that. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. So, boundaries are, it's an act of self respect. It's not selfish. Where only when you are whole can you give your best. And so, therefore, it's an act of, it's the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. And I repeat, It's how we position the no. Use some of the options that I put forward. And most of us, we don't avoid boundaries because we don't know how. We avoid them because we don't want to disappoint. And we've been taught that disappointing others is worse than exhausting ourselves. We can be exhausted, we can give up ourselves, but we mustn't say no. Please think about how you can set up your boundaries, take care of yourself. We've got, we're nearly at the end, a few days to the end of January. We've still got many months to go. Think about the boundaries you need to put in place. Why? Because you matter. And only if you're one whole person can you give out your best. So thank you for joining me for this live. And I'll see you next week for the next live on the Midweek Reboot. Take care for now. Bye.